Psalm 91, the prayer of protection you need today. There are moments when even the strongest heart feels exposed, when the air feels heavy and every headline, every sound, every silence seems to echo danger. It is in these moments that the soul begins to ask, where can I be safe? What can truly guard me when everything else trembles? Psalm 91 was written for such questions. It is not a promise for perfect days, but for divine presence in imperfect ones. It does not deny the storm. It declares who commands it. This psalm is the language of trust whispered by those who have walked through fire and found that God's protection is not a wall of stone, but a shadow of wings. It is the breath between fear and faith, a refuge not built by hands, but by His nearness. Those who dwell in that secret place do not escape life. They live it from within the shelter of the Almighty. You might have prayed for signs, for proof that heaven still watches. You might have wondered if your prayers dissolve in the air before they reach Him. Yet the truth of Psalm 91 is this: you are never unguarded. Even now, unseen hands hold back what could have crushed you. Even now, mercy surrounds you like morning light, quiet but unstoppable. As you listen today, let your heart unclench. Let your mind rest from the constant watch it keeps. Because this is not just a prayer, it is a homecoming. The place your soul remembers but your fears have forgotten. The Most High has not moved. His shadow still falls over those who choose to trust. So let this be your moment to return. Breathe deeply. Listen as if these ancient words were written just for you, for they were. And as you hear them, may faith rise again, not as theory, but as shelter. The secret place is not somewhere you travel to. It is somewhere you return to. It is not found by moving, but by stillness. It exists not in a temple built of stone, but within the quiet space where your spirit finally stops arguing with God. Psalm 91 begins there. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. These are not words for the hurried. They are an invitation to abide, to linger, to stay long enough for fear to lose its voice. The secret place is not about hiding from the world, but seeing it through divine perspective. When you dwell in it, your problems do not disappear, but their power over you does. You stop measuring life by danger and start seeing it by nearness. Nearness to the one who commands the storm, who sees the sparrow fall, who calls you by name. In that presence, anxiety begins to dissolve, not because you have gained control, but because you have finally surrendered it. Many try to visit this place only in crisis, treating God like a shelter reserved for rain. But the psalm speaks of those who dwell, who make their home there. To dwell is to root your identity in His presence. To abide under His shadow is to live knowing that no matter what rises against you, there is a higher covering that remains unmoved. This is the unseen geography of faith, space where fear cannot follow, where the noise of the world fades and what is eternal begins to speak again. It is the stillness beneath chaos, the whisper that reminds you that your safety was never built on circumstances, but on covenant. If you can find that place again today, not by sight, but by trust, then you have found what the world cannot give or take away. For under His shadow, every threat loses meaning, and every heart learns to rest. Fear always speaks first. It shouts in headlines, echoes in memories, and disguises itself as logic. It says, you are not safe. You are not strong enough. You are alone. Its language is urgency. Its rhythm is panic. And its goal is separation from peace, from truth, from the presence of God. But faith does not argue back with the same tone. Faith simply stands in the light and lets fear reveal its own smallness. Psalm 91 answers fear not with denial, but with position. It says, I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress. My God, in Him I will trust. The one who says this has already chosen where to stand. Fear is still there, but its power fades in the light of trust. Every word of this psalm is a confrontation, a declaration that the believer no longer agrees with fear's prophecy. The shadow of faith is stronger than the shadow of threat. It is the awareness that even in the presence of danger, there is a greater presence still. You may walk through fire, will not burn as others do, because what surrounds you is not circumstance, but covenant. We often mistake protection for absence of pain, yet the psalm never promises that pain will not come. It promises that pain will never have the final word. The snare may be set, the arrow may fly, but he shall deliver you, not once, but always. Not because of your strength, but because of his faithfulness. So when fear speaks again, and it will remember that silence can be an answer. You do not owe fear a conversation. Let your stillness be your faith, your trust be your defense. For the shadow of the Almighty does not fall on the loud, but on the willing. And when you choose to rest beneath it, you discover that what once terrified you can no longer touch you. There are protections you can see, locked doors, careful plans, people you trust. But there are others you never notice, mercies that move quietly between you and what could have destroyed you. Psalm 91 reveals this mystery. Surely he shall deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the perilous pestilence. These are not poetic exaggerations. They are glimpses of invisible grace, the unseen work of a God who guards even what you never knew was in danger. You have been spared more than you realize. The delays you resented, the closed doors you fought against, the detours that seemed unfair as many, were shields disguised as frustration. Faith means learning to thank him not only for what he gives, but for what he prevents. Protection is not always visible, and safety does not always feel peaceful in the moment it happens. God's faithfulness is described as armor, as wings, as a shield. Not because he needs metaphors, but because we need reminders. In his presence, nothing is wasted. Even what was meant to harm becomes a lesson in trust. The enemy sets traps, but heaven moves first. There is a profound comfort in knowing that divine protection is not reactive, but proactive. Before the arrow is drawn, God already stands between. Before the sickness spreads, his word has already gone forth. The believer does not live untouched by trouble, but untaken by it. You may bend, but you will not break. You may cry, but you will not collapse. And as the psalm says, you shall not be afraid of the terror by night, nor of the arrow that flies by day. That is not a call to be fearless. It is an invitation to rest in the awareness that someone stronger is awake while you sleep. You are not surviving by chance. You are covered by covenant. The fiercest battles of life are rarely fought in the open. They unfold within the mind, where unseen voices compete for your belief. Fear builds its fortress there, brick by brick, whispering that danger is inevitable, that control is safety, that surrender is weakness. Yet Psalm 91 invites you to a different fortress, one not built by human reasoning, but by trust. His truth shall be your shield and buckler. Truth, not control. Faith, not fear. This is where divine protection begins, not around you, but within you. You may pray for God to calm the storm outside, but he often begins by calming the storm inside. The moment you believe his word more than your worry, peace enters like light through a cracked door. It does not shout. It settles, and in that settling, fear loses authority. The psalm does not deny the presence of enemies, but it denies their power to define reality. 1,000 may fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come near you. This is not arrogance, it is alignment. When your mind aligns with God's truth, panic no longer dictates your path. You begin to see not what the world predicts, but what heaven promises. Every anxious thought is an invitation to run or to rest. To rehearse fear or to remember faith. You cannot silence the world, but you can choose whose voice you magnify. And when his truth becomes louder than the lies, protection becomes not just external, but internal. You begin to walk through life unshaken, not because nothing happens, but because you know where your mind is anchored. So when the noise rises again, speak truth aloud, not to convince God, but to remind yourself. He is my refuge and my fortress. My God, in him I will trust. That declaration reshapes reality. It tells your mind what your spirit already knows. You are covered, guarded, held. There are seasons when the light feels far away, when shadows lengthen and prayers seem to echo back unanswered. Yet Psalm 91 reminds us that shadows are not signs of God's absence. They are proof of his nearness. You cannot stand under the shadow of the Almighty unless you are close to him. Shadows appear only when light is near. What feels like darkness may, in truth, be the covering of his wings. Faith is not the denial of night, but the decision to trust in its purpose. When the psalmist writes, "He shall cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you shall take refuge," it is not sentimentality, it is sanctuary. The image is tender, yet powerful. The Almighty stoops low enough to shelter the fragile, and strong enough to silence the storm. The same hand that shapes galaxies draws a shield around your heart. It is easy to believe in God's protection when life is bright, but shadows reveal what comfort cannot teach: dependence. The kind of faith that is not built on evidence, but on relationship. In the shadow, you learn to hear differently. You no longer look for proof of his presence, you begin to feel it. Every believer must walk through nights of uncertainty, but not every believer remembers that night was never meant to destroy, only to deepen. What you cannot see clearly, he sees completely. When you lose direction, his wings still cover you. And as dawn returns, you realize the shadow was not punishment, but protection. So if you find yourself beneath heavy skies, do not rush the night. The shadow you fear might be the very shelter you need. Wait there, breathe there, pray there. Because in the secret stillness of the shadow, faith matures and morning always comes. Every word of Psalm 91 rests upon a single foundation: the name of the Lord. Because he has set his love upon me, therefore I will deliver him. I will set him on high because he has known my name. To know his name is not to recite it, it is to recognize his nature. His name is not a label, it is a presence. Every title, refuge, fortress, deliverer, almighty, reveals another facet of who he is to you. And the more you know his nature, the less you fear what surrounds you. Names carry meaning, but his name carries power. When you speak it in faith, the atmosphere shifts. Fear loses language, darkness loses shape. You are not calling a distant deity, you are invoking a living covenant. His name is both authority and intimacy. It reminds heaven who you trust and reminds your heart who holds you. We often call on God when we are desperate, but those who dwell in his secret place learn to call on him daily. To know his name is to live aware of his presence, to walk as one who is never alone. He shall call upon me, and I will answer him, the psalm promises. That is the language of relationship, not religion. God does not offer protection as a contract, but as communion. Every prayer that rises from faith reaches him, not because of perfect words, but because of perfect love. When you whisper his name in the night, when fear, doubt, or loneliness surround you, you are not simply speaking, you are aligning with truth. The enemy knows his name and trembles. The believer knows his name and rests. So speak it again today. Whisper it as you breathe. Let his name become your rhythm, your refuge, your reassurance. For in that name, every shadow bends, every storm stills, every heart remembers. The Almighty is not far, he is here. The closing verses of Psalm 91 are not merely poetry, they are prophecy. Because he has set his love upon me, therefore I will deliver him. I will set him on high. These are not future hopes, they are divine guarantees. The psalm begins with trust and ends with triumph, revealing that faith is not a fragile wish, but a path that leads from fear to fulfillment. Every verse draws you closer to a God who does not only protect, but also honors those who love him. Notice the sequence: love, deliverance, elevation, satisfaction, salvation. It is the progression of a soul that chooses to remain under his shadow until dawn breaks. God's promise is personal. He does not speak to crowds, but to hearts. I will be with him in trouble, I will deliver him and honor him. He does not promise a life without trouble. He promises his presence within it. This is where Psalm 91 becomes more than comfort, it becomes covenant. The same God who once covered Israel in the desert now covers you in your daily wilderness. The same voice that calmed David's fear now whispers through your uncertainty. Every rescue, every restoration, every moment of unexpected peace is the echo of these final words. With long life, I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. Salvation is not just the promise of heaven someday. It is the reality of his nearness today. It is wholeness in the midst of chaos, clarity in confusion, strength in weakness. When you choose to dwell, to trust, to love, the promises of this psalm begin to unfold around you like light through clouds. So as you reach the end of these verses, remember, the psalm never ends in fear, it ends in fulfillment. The secret place leads to the shadow leads to the promise, and the promise leads home. And in that home, no danger can remain, no night can endure, no heart is left unguarded. Now that the psalm is spoken, it becomes your turn to answer. Every promise invites a response, and every word of protection calls for a declaration of trust. To dwell under the shadow of the Almighty is not a passive act. It is an active choice made daily. You must decide where your heart will live, beneath anxiety or beneath grace. The world offers noise and distraction, but the voice of God still whispers, "Abide in me." This prayer is not about escape. It is about alignment. To dwell is to choose peace over panic, surrender over control, faith over fear. Tomorrow we will rise again under the same wings, guided by the same hand. For the God who guarded you today will meet you again in the morning. Until then, may His shadow be your covering, His presence your peace, and His name your strength. Rest now, beloved. You are seen, you are safe, you are home.